has started, so we're gonna kick it off with another theme month. But I'm not gonna tell you what the theme is. You'll just have to guess. And if you guess right, you'll get nothing.
Knack was the second game I got for my PlayStation 4, along with Killzone Shadowfall since Amazon was selling them for $40 each. If you're wondering what the first game was, it's Tomb Raider Definitive Edition. I figured that I needed to get it since I needed a game that I didn't already play, and there weren't that many games available on the PS4 yet, and I would say that there still isn't, as 2014 was a horrible year for game releases, with Nintendo releasing the only good games that live up to their hype instead of the crap EA, Ubisoft, and Activision shat out on our plates as starving gamers. I will say that I sort of regret buying a PS4 as early as I did, buying it in February last year. I try not to regret it, but I find it to be my least used system so far. The last time I turned it on was when Dust and Elysian Tale was free on PlayStation Plus, and that was just to download it. The last time I actually played a game on it was back with my Destiny review, and that was around the end of September. And before that, it was Watch Dogs, and before that, it was Strider. But it's not the system's fault that the industry isn't putting out anything good, and is just rehashing things from previous systems because no one decided to prepare for the upcoming new systems.
Why do you think that some of the games of the year are on Nintendo systems? It's like they knew that 2014 was going to suck and it was their time to shine.
Knack was developed by Sony Computer Entertainment Japan Studio, who are known for the Ape Escape game, and they had a hand with Team Ico developing Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. There's really no development history on this game that I could find. It's kind of like an unknown title, or if it was meant to be a glorified tech demo, much like Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, which was criticized because it was a $40 tech demo that dropped in price very quickly due to consumer outrage. Although no one complained when Gran Turismo 5 Prologue was released, graphically Knack is pretty good, minus the hair on the characters, which is pretty stiff. I had a very hard time finding any polygon edges around where you'd usually see them, like around the shoulders and fingers, and I couldn't see any, which is good. The textures are pretty good and the game is very bright and colorful, but the animation has that motion capture feel to it, instead of being animated by hand. As I've said in my previous reviews, you can tell when cutscene animation is motion captured by watching the arms and hands. The music is pretty generic and is something you'd hear in an adventure movie for kids.
Now, Knack is a kid's game in look and tone. Gameplay-wise, that's a whole nother story.
Knack controls pretty well, but he feels really sluggish, but I think that's just how he's animated. You can jump, double jump, punch things, and activate super moves. You have no control over the camera as the right analog stick is assigned to dodge, so there's times you'll die from an enemy who shot you from off screen because you were paying attention to the guys you could see. Combat is really simple. You just mash the square button until the enemies are dead, and dodge their attacks. And that's where I think it ends for being a kid's game when it comes to gameplay at least. It's easy to pick up, but holy damn is this game unforgiving. The main mechanic of Knack is collecting relics. The more you collect, the bigger you'll get, increasing your health pool and strength. It sounds pretty straightforward, but the method of progression is done poorly. Everything scales with Knack's size, so the bigger and stronger you get, the bigger and stronger the enemies get. So getting bigger really does nothing in the end. No matter what size you are, the enemies match your size and do the same amount of damage. If you're small, the small enemies will take off 33% damage. If you're medium, the medium enemies will take off 33% damage. If you're big and the enemies are big, well, you get the gist of it.
There's no point to getting bigger because everything scales with your size, making it completely pointless. Oh wait, there is a point to it. Look at all the particle effects. Oh, it takes so much processing power. Look at the powerhouse that is the PlayStation 4 as it struggles to maintain 1080p at 60 frames per second, although it averages more at 30 frames per second even at the beginning of the game.
When it comes to taking damage, I was saying that the enemies will take off 33% damage. That's if the game is being generous. Most of the time, enemies will take off 50% or more, or just instant kill you. Even in the beginning of the game this will happen. And while dodging will help, one-on-one, but when facing multiple enemies, it doesn't help that much, because you can dodge into an enemy attack, and it doesn't help that dodging has a slight pause after it. When ice physics come into play, you might as well just give up. Dodging on ice does nothing. Even if you air dodge, it's like you were on it. You can be on solid ground, jump over the ice, using the dodge will act as if you're on it. Sure, you can use your superpowers to ease the pain, but there's a huge catch to it. To charge them up, you need to smash sun crystals, but the amount in which you gain seems incredibly random. You can break a small one and get a lot, or break several large ones and barely get anything. Collecting relics to increase your size is only done at predetermined points. at least the ones that greatly increase your size. Others that you find laying around will mostly replenish your health at what seems like random amounts. As you can see and hear, a lot of them fly to you, but barely replenish anything if at all.
It's like being in a state of perpetual April Fools. You're almost dead, so here's a ton of relics, but only filled 2 pixels. Good luck, fucker!
Even though it feels random, I know it's not, but it feels like the game is just laughing at me as health pickups are rare and do close to nothing unless it's a scripted area and where you're supposed to be bigger. If you take damage early on in a section, it's easier to jump off the side of the stage if you're able to, or just let an enemy kill you so that you can start over fresh, as you'll respawn at the checkpoint with all your health replenished. The smallest screw up can have the biggest consequences, as I had to do several sections over more times than I can count. The level design leaves a lot to be desired. It's just running through corridors to open rooms and back to corridors. It's very linear, with the only exploration being that hidden rooms are on the side of the walls. Finding these rooms will give you health, sunstones, or pieces to equipable gadgets, or gems that can increase your stats. Unless you have a guide, you'll probably be going back to these areas to find any hidden rooms you may have missed. The levels are really bland, and while the world they created is neat, I'm not interested in it because everything feels the same. It's not like the great PlayStation platformers where the areas are vastly different from each other, making the adventure you're on seem like you're traveling the world, not just staying in a localized place.
The story is aimed at the younger crowd. It's trying to be Pixar, but it's got one of the most obvious and dumbest villains I've seen in a long time.
The setting takes place in a world where technology is powered by these stone things called relics. Knack is a golem made of relics, and there's goblins who hate humans who drove them from their homes, after the goblins started a war on them, or so they say. The goblins attack the humans with tanks, which is technology they don't possess. So in light of this discovery, the government brings in a guy named Victor who owns a robotics company, whose design and demeanor says that he's the bad guy, is brought in to help combat the goblins. The professor and his assistant tag along with Knack, and his assistant's uncle comes along to investigate how the goblins got the tanks. After confronting the Goblin King, Victor kidnaps the assistant, so this way the professor and Knack go to his palace where he shows him a gigantic relic. He says that Knack is the key to figuring it out and wants the professor's help. So Knack, the professor, and his assistant escape the palace, only to infiltrate it later where they discover that Victor found more giant relics and that Knack is literally the key to opening a door. The bad guy does bad guy things that aren't actually bad, as his plan is yet to be revealed, and then you have to stop this goblin guy.
And fucking end! Why doesn't it end? It just keeps going. 5.5 hours in. 5.5 hours in, and it feels like I've been playing longer than Kingdom Hearts 2's runtime.
The game overstays its welcome after the first 2 hours. I've lost so much interest in this story because the bad guy doesn't come off as a bad guy. He wants to help humanity, but no one is willing to help him. Nor does he explain his plan to the people he wants to help him. What is wrong with the people in this game? Obviously, it's bad writing, because even though you play as Knack, the story tends to focus more on the other characters than him. I stopped playing at Chapter 7, Part 1. That's a little past the halfway point. I was not going to waste another 5.5 hours on this irritating piece of garbage. When I saw that I was 5.5 hours in and it felt like 30 hours, I had an epiphany. I got World of Warcraft Warlords of Draenor and Pokemon Alpha Sapphire for Christmas. I could be playing those instead. In the nearly 4 years I've been doing this, that thought has never crossed my mind. I've always been focused, even when I played games like Ride to Hell Retribution, Sonic 06, or Bubsy 3D. I have never thought that I could be playing something better. The characters are so bland and generic. The story is bland. The levels are bland. The combat is bland. And we're going back to that. How is it that you can take 2 consecutive shots, the first taking off about a third of your health, and the second killing you? Why are there attacks from smaller enemies that can kill you instantly or pretty damn close to it when you're bulked up as hell?
There's no progress at all to combat because everything scales with your size. If it looks like it's going to be a big reward, it's not going to be, making the entire Katamari Damacy element completely pointless.
And I know that I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but Sonic Boom is the better game. They're both button mashers, but Sonic Boom has more combat options with a light fast attack and a slower stronger attack to it. While with Knack they're super moves, but you need to charge them up, and there will be times you'll get stuck in a section, dying over and over to charge up your supers by collecting sunstones to get past an area where there's too many enemies firing too many cheap shots at you, which prevents you from progressing because of enemy placement. In Sonic Boom you can take a lot of damage, but there's nothing that'll kill you in 1 to 3 hits, unlike Knack where no matter what size you are, there will be enemies that will. While Sonic Boom was too easy, and its combat wasn't rewarding either, Knack is too difficult, to the point where I can't recommend this game for a younger audience, which is the target demographic. I think that this game would be too hard for kids who are just starting their gaming career, at least on the normal difficulty. I haven't tried easy, and I don't plan on trying it anytime soon because the story is so incredibly dull, and so is the gameplay, that I see no reason for going through it again.
There's better options than Knack, like Jack, Ratchet, and Sly if we're going to talk PlayStation platformers, because this is just a glorified tech demo and it suffers from way too much ambition.
I think that Sony was too ambitious with Knack. They said that it combines the elements of Crash Bandicoot, Katamari Damacy, and God of War, and I think they were expecting Knack to take off like how the original Crash series did. While the Crash games had a one-hit kill system, they did it correct by not throwing waves of powerful enemies at you. In fact, in those Crash games, the enemies only needed one hit except for bosses, and you could take 2 additional hits with Aku Aku masks. Knack suffers from trying to be like other games that it's not trying to be its own thing. And the sad thing is, Knack is a great original concept that should have done for the PS4 what Crash, Jack, Sly, Ratchet, God of War, and Uncharted did for their respective systems. But because it's so bland, it's boring. I don't think a sequel will be made unless there's some serious overhaul to the gameplay. And I think the game wouldn't be so difficult if the combat was more fleshed out instead of being incredibly basic. I will say that I'm glad Knack exists, because we do need more bright and colorful games instead of these dark, gritty action games that plague the 7th generation and are spilling over into this new one.
I want to give Knack a trash rating, but I think that would be unfair.
My feelings of giving it such a rating is due to the unfair difficulty of the game, and the frustration of getting killed in one hit at the end of an area and now needing to trek through it all over again, all because of the erratic distance between checkpoints. To clarify, I have nothing against a challenging game, but there's a difference between fair and unfair. For example, God Hand is an incredibly difficult game, but it's fair, and in that game the dodging works the exact same way. However, it's more responsive than Knack's. Dark Souls is also a really hard game, but it's fair, and I think that dodging in Knack is the problem since it's such a short distance that it's near useless. It just feels that Knack is difficult for all the wrong reasons. But while the game looks and sounds nice, the gameplay leaves a lot to be desired. The story is bland, the level design is bland for a majority of the time, the level layout is so linear that it might as well be a straight line. The characters are generic and it just reeks of mediocrity, but at least it functions for a majority of the time. But it's so boring that I'd rather play something else because I've gotten no enjoyment out of this game whatsoever.
It's not a bad game, but it's not good either. It's just okay, but I wouldn't even pick it up in the bargain bin if it was there because I don't think it's worth owning. But I would like to see a sequel that does improve upon everything that needs improvement.